So this past week at our ministers' meeting, I was not exactly a ray of sunshine. During my part of the meeting, I shared a litany of concerns that are as familiar as they are real. The Omicron variant is disrupting my hopes for our congregation. It's messing with my holiday plans, and it's bringing me deep grief for healthcare and for medical professionals. I was also grumpy because I had just finished up quarantining after a COVID exposure that canceled my partner's birthday party. I had just read a terrifying article about glaciers and ice shelves in Antarctica and the coming rise of sea levels, just sooner than we think. And of course, the dangers to our democracy grow daily and loom over everything. I eventually paused for my venting long enough for Reverend Kelly to ask a question. "So," she said, "you're getting ready to speak about joy?" This was a fair question given the general direction of my commentary. But something in my brain quickly shifted when she asked the question. "Oh yes," I said. "There's plenty to be joyful about." New obstacles seem to be thrown in our path all the time these days, but sources of joy for me are always close at hand. And the first joyful thing that popped into my mind was music. That's because just a few days earlier, I'd had 3 friends over to my house to play some music together. One friend is a pianist, another plays the tin whistle, and the third, like me, plays the violin. These friends come from musical families and are gifted in ways that I am not, and they are so patient with my skill level. The guy who plays the whistle once described my fiddle playing as 35% talent, 65% joy. You could maybe think of that as a compliment. Mostly I thought of it as hilarious and true, and I'm just extremely grateful to have anyone to jam with. Making music is such a creative act. And by creative, I don't mean clever or inventive. I mean an act of creation, creating something where previously nothing existed. Creating sound or music is an experience. You're creating an experience where otherwise there would be only silence. It's a kind of creation that exists in beautiful contrast to the myriad kinds of destruction in our world. And it's creation with an emotional purpose. In the building where I take my violin lessons, there's a quote on the wall from the German writer Bertold Auerbach. "Music washes away from the soul the dust of everyday life." There's a lot of dust clogging up our souls these days. And so when my music friends came over, we jumped right into playing. We hadn't played indoors together in more than 2 years, and it was glorious to hear the sound vibrate off the walls and the wood floors. One thing I love about my chosen instrument is that if you put sheet music from Bach in front of it, it's a violin. And if you put a Cajun or Celtic tune in front of it, it magically becomes a fiddle. And that night we were in fiddling mode, with joy emanating from our instruments, our bodies, and our smiles. I know many of you in this room today and online know what that feeling is like. Music can be a wellspring of joy. Our theme this month at the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis is Opening to Joy. And we ministers have accepted the challenge of this topic at this challenging time. I've titled this talk Hitting the Right Notes because it's a good season and a good Sunday to reflect on how music and other practices bring about joy. And it's a good time to remind ourselves that joy is a form of resistance to the forces arrayed against it. I want to talk about that second part first. Joy does seem to have a lot of forces arrayed against it right now, as I indicated in my venting in the ministers' meeting. But I know I'm far from the only person feeling this way. On any given day right now, you can find abundant news articles about the increased emotional and mental health struggles that Americans of all backgrounds are facing because of the pandemic. For people who care about other people, it is heartbreaking. But unfortunately, for people who care about consolidating political power, well, they see all the chaos of the present day as a positive. That's because stressed out, distracted citizens are less likely to take action to improve democracy, and more likely to accept or even embrace authoritarian practices. All the maddening opposition to mask mandates and vaccines that you're seeing isn't some kind of grassroots uprising from everyday people. It's a coordinated effort by those who want to destabilize the economy and society for their own ends. It's all pretty daunting, but that just means it's extra important to remember and cultivate joy. That's because joy is not only for our individual lives and well-being, but also for our collective well-being and liberation. Joy is a form of resistance, as the poet Toy Dericote put it. Joy is a way of saying, nope, you oppressors are not the boss of me. You are not in charge of how I engage with the world and relate to other people. As Adrienne Marie Brown says in her book, Pleasure Activism, feeling good is not frivolous. It is freedom. Joy is revolutionary, and joy makes the work of justice and liberation not only bearable, but irresistible. But how do we keep joy at the ready? How do we access it through the spiderwebs of daily obligations and relentless bad news? I don't know that I can answer for anyone but myself, but for me, joy is literally always at hand. Because in the home office where I spend nearly all of my waking hours, my violin is just a few feet away. In the middle of a busy day, I can glance over and see the violin case and the stack of sheet music and music books. I can view it as a reward for later, or if I have a few minutes between Zoom meetings, I can just pick it up and play. I can't have a jam session with my friends every day, but making music solo is fulfilling too. And whenever I pick up my violin, it feels like an extension of my body, or a living being of its own. And it connects me with the idea of beauty. It connects me to my ancestors in Quebec and Italy and Ireland. It helps me transcend the mundane. I know other instrumentalists and singers have these experiences too. And while my specific musical choices might not bring everyone joy, they are the right choices for me. And that's one of the things about both music and joy. They can be shared, but they can also be highly personal. This reflects the complexities of the human experience and the diversity of human beings. Because when an individual is having a joyful experience with music or anything else, it can be hard for that person to imagine that others are not feeling the same way. That guy blasting his speakers in the park might think his music is so amazing that he's doing everyone a favor. But the reality is that there are few to zero universal experiences shared by all humans. There is no single objective pinnacle of joy or of music. Rather than a pinnacle, there is an endless mountain range with peaks for each person, but no one thing that speaks to everyone. Curiously, I am reminded of this every time I go to the gym. Some years back, the locker rooms at my gym were remodeled to include a speaker system. And for the first few weeks after the renovation, bouncy pop music could be heard in the dressing rooms. This was fine with me. I didn't recognize some of the performers, but the up-tempo beats provided some energy for those of us getting ready to work out. But then, one day, the music abruptly changed. Someone must have complained. And so now, and for years actually, we have been hearing instrumentals that to me seem like the soundtrack to a movie about someone facing a grave illness. The music is slow, mostly in minor keys, with plinky pianos and anguished cellos, and the pieces repeat often. A few of the numbers are beautiful. For example, there is a lovely piano piece by Eric Satie that we've heard here in this congregation many times. but it is very strange to hear a melody I associate with memorial services when I'm in a locker room. Now, there might be gym-goers who find that this music is just right. And I don't mean to yuck their yum, as people say, but it doesn't bring me joy or hit me in quite the right way. I did recently fill out a comment card asking that the speakers be given a rest, so that we might each bring our own songs, in our hearts or in our earbuds. I'd even be happier with a wide mix of music, a different genre every day, so everybody's soul gets a turn at being washed. But until then, there's the upside, that I will continue to get dressed more quickly and get on my way, to try to preserve some of the momentum from my workout before the music brings down my energy and my mood. There's science behind all of this, of course, the connection between music and mood or music and joy. My sound, is it back? It's back, okay. Just the other day, I was reading about a small study of the musical choices made by young people experiencing depression. The participants in this study were often drawn to more somber music because it matched their mood, and they found it more relatable and comforting to listen to. However, the researchers noted that such music actually worsened the metrics used to measure the subject's mental well-being. Music is that powerful. It has the ability to affect moods and outlooks, for better or worse. That's why people have such strong feelings about what they hear. And that's why it's important to carefully choose what we put into our ears and into our minds, to carefully choose our attitudes and our companions if we want the result to be joy. I'm reminded of a meme I've seen on the internet the past few weeks, an anonymous quote that goes like this: "If you choose not to find joy in the snow, you will have less joy in your life, but the same amount of snow." As someone with a fairly neutral attitude about winter, I don't love it and I don't hate it, I appreciate this sentiment greatly. I choose to look for the beauty of snow as far into the season as I possibly can. I never succeed in April, but I do my best. And I'm well aware that our companions and our communities play a role in determining how much joy we find in what is happening to us, whether it's the weather or anything else. A couple of examples to illustrate the point. I recall a brutal cold snap back when I lived in an apartment with a detached garage. When I'd get in my car, I would be so cold, but I would just try not to think about it and just go on my way. One day, in the middle of that cold spell, someone I'd known a long time was with me and accompanied me as I went into the cold garage and the cold car, and my experience was completely different. My companion could not stop talking about how cold and miserable they were, complaining for several minutes until the car warmed up, and even after that. There I was, in the same cold car that I'd been in all week, but the negative words that accumulated in the frosty air made me feel much more miserable and much colder than I had been feeling. The attitudes around us matter and greatly affect our senses of gratitude and joy. Another wintry example of this in a positive direction can be found by experiencing a snowstorm in the ski country of the American West. Up in the mountains, where winter sports are a way of life and water in any form is precious, you might never hear a single complaint about snow. Snow is always a gift and a cause for celebration, even in April. And the community's joy rubs off on just about everyone, regardless of your past feelings about snow. You have the same amount of snow, whether you're joyful or not. The challenges of winter in general, and this winter in particular, the challenges of joy in this long year and this pandemic are, of course, more consequential than a snowstorm. But the seriousness of what's going on makes the call to find joy even more urgent. So in these days of longest nights, May each of us find joy where we can. In the brightness of a sweet December orange, or in the sparkle of a decorated tree. In the glow of a neighbor's holiday lights, or in the crooked smile of a snowman. In the twinkle of expectation in a child's eye. May we find joy in the songs of the season and in the melodies that form the soundtracks of our lives. In our intimate circles, in our communities, in ourselves. May our joy be the fuel that keeps us warm and keeps us going. Happy solstice, Merry Christmas, and best wishes for the holiday season.